From the Gulf States newsroom, this is the Gulf States Gumbo, your weekly serving of stories from Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana. I'm economic mobility reporter Stephen Bisaha, minding the pot this week. States across the U.S. are receiving a historic amount of money to fight the opioid crisis. But for some in the South, access to medication to treat addiction is still limited.
Everybody doesn't understand that you're trying to do what you can to stay healthy and try to get this monkey off your back, but it's so hard.
And guaranteed income is having a moment in the South. We take a look at that and the movement's future.
Because poverty is an ongoing pandemic. It's towards economic insecurity.
That's all coming up on the Gulf States Gumbo. The South is receiving hundreds of millions of dollars from historic lawsuits from opioid manufacturers and distributors. Some call it a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. This giant pot of money is meant to help heal the damage caused by the opioid crisis. But as our health equity reporter Drew Hawkins reports, in Alabama, medication that could help treat addiction is out of reach for many who need it the most.
Hello?
Hi, where are you at?
It's Saturday night in Birmingham. I'm riding around with Suzanne Smith while she hands out what she calls care packages, things like clean needles, bandages, and clothes. Smith works as peer support for clinics across the city. And right now, she's looking for her friend Blair, who asked that we not use her last name because of the stigma associated with people who use drugs.
No, I'm going to come to you. Where are you headed?
Smith's lived experience helps her connect with people struggling with addiction, living on the street. She's been in recovery for over 20 years, and she says what helped her stop using was medication, like methadone, one of the most effective ways to treat opioid use disorder. She says Alabama could help more of the people she works with access treatment, using money from lawsuits with opioid manufacturers and distributors. The state says it's awarding $8 million from the latest round of settlement funds to organizations for prevention, treatment, and recovery support. But that's a small fraction of what the state has received so far.
Okay, this is my friend Blair.
We find Blair on the steps of a church. Her story really epitomizes the opioid epidemic, which is what the settlement funds are supposed to help fix. Experts say there are 3 waves. Blair started taking prescribed pain medication after a surgery, and that's wave 1. And when the pills dried up almost overnight, she moved to heroin, wave 2. And when the streets were flooded with synthetic opioids like fentanyl, the 3rd wave washed over her.
I had a wonderful marriage, great children, a wonderful home life, a beautiful house, everything I ever dreamed of. But I had this addiction to this medicine, and I couldn't stop taking it, and I didn't know why.
Blair wants to get treatment, but methadone can be difficult to access for unhoused people.
Everybody doesn't understand that you're trying to do what you can to stay healthy and, try to get this monkey off your back, but it's so hard. I never thought I'd be anywhere like this.
If people want treatment, they have to get a state assessment, which is almost impossible if they don't have a phone or a car. And they have to go to a methadone clinic every day to receive their medication. And there are only a few, and sometimes they're miles away from the nearest bus stop.
I've heard my patients say, as long as it's easier for me to get heroin or fentanyl than it is to get methadone, I'm going to pick the heroin or fentanyl.
Dr. Ellen Eaton is an associate professor at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. She also says the opioid settlement funding could be a real game changer and help with things like medication costs, transportation, and other resources to support people in recovery. But Alabama isn't required to report how it's spending the money.
Gosh, wouldn't that be great? If I knew which nonprofits had received funding that I could refer my patients for housing or counseling.
In the meantime, people like Suzanne Smith are the last line of defense for unhoused people in the city. And living on the street is hard, especially if you have opioid use disorder. She checks near dumpsters, behind gas stations, in tents on the side of the road. Beneath a bridge, we find Roy, who also asked that we not use his last name. He's sitting in a camping chair next to his tent, his leg propped up and wrapped in a bandage.
Do you need any supplies?
I do.
Okay. Do you need any wound care?
I do.
Smith says she sees a lot of wounds that become infected. sometimes from injuries, and sometimes from shooting drugs. And because they're labeled as drug users at hospitals, she says they won't get pain medication there, and their withdrawals would be severe. So they often don't go, or they're not able to go. Several people we met, including Roy, and I know this might be hard to hear, but they've had to resort to using maggots to clean their infected wounds.
I cleaned it, wrapped it loose, and there was a couple of flies flying around. I just let them land on it.
After she gives him a care package, Smith reaches into a bag filled with little inspirational quotes she got at the dollar store, and she hands one to Roy.
It says, your greatest creation is always going to be your life story.
Oh, yeah!
With hundreds of millions in settlement funds coming in over the next decade, doctors and advocates hope more will be used to provide support for people who want to get treatment, but have the most difficulty accessing it. For the Gulf States Newsroom, I'm Drew Hawkins.
The Gulf States Newsroom is a team of journalists working with NPR and local public media stations in Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana to cover the issues that matter to you. Email us, connect@gulfstatesnewsroom.org.
The New York Liberty won the WNBA championship in October, and that New York team has an Alabama connection. Our sports and culture reporter Joseph King went to a local high school in Birmingham as they were honoring their hometown hero by retiring her jersey.
Jalen Sherrod's 0-0 is going up into the rafters. The 23-year-old graduated from Ramsey High School back in 2018. While there, she was known as one of the best players in Birmingham. She says all of the praise was unexpected.
I was in the middle of still playing when they called me and told me they was going to do it, so I was like, all right, it still ain't really hit to like right now in this moment being here, but I'm blessed, man. I'm so grateful.
After suffering a near career-ending hip injury, she went on to play at the University of Colorado and led the Buffaloes to 2 NCAA tournaments and became one of the most decorated players in the school's history. Sherrod signed with the New York Liberty in August and helped them win the 2024 WNBA championship against the Minnesota Lynx. For the Gulf States Newsroom, I'm Joseph King.
Guaranteed income is the idea that to help some people in need, government should give them cash, no strings attached. It's long been a pipe dream for many welfare reformers, and in recent years, that dream has been given test runs in cities across the U.S. and here in the South. I've been covering this movement for years with WWNO's Aubri Juhasz, and she's here to talk with me about how these recent pilots went. Aubri, thanks for joining me.
Happy to do it.
So, Aubri, can you go through the quick crash course of what a guaranteed income actually is?
Yes. So it's a safety net program. Many see it as a kind of welfare reform, since existing programs can be tricky to navigate. For example, if your income goes up even by a little bit, you can lose benefits. So the idea is that this is a stable source of support, and you can spend that money however you want. Like I've said before, traditional welfare programs are pretty restrictive. You can't use, a grocery program to fix your car. In recent years, a group, Mayors for a Guaranteed Income, has been pushing for, more programs and eventually a federal policy. They've helped launch dozens of pilots across the country and finance them, including where you live, right, Stephen?
Yeah, here in Birmingham, about a year or two ago, the city started giving money to 110 single moms, $375 a month for a year. And a report just came in about that and showed there was a lot of positives. And the moms got to spend more time with their children, got to treat them to things like ice cream and pay for things like dance lessons. And overall, they had fewer childcare issues getting in the way of work. And Aubri, where you live in New Orleans, they also gave a similar amount of money, but in this case, it was to young adults.
Right. It's this group of teenagers, early 20-somethings that are called opportunity youth. It's kind of a weird label, but it basically means that someone isn't in school or working at that specific point in time. And it's squishy. People move in and out of school and different jobs. So the idea behind giving them money was to help them, get a firmer footing, make it through those early years. And while, there were some benefits, it did help people take little steps forward. For the most part, participants were not considered financially better off when it ended. And kind of the reasoning there is that $350 a month for less than a year just isn't enough money to change people's circumstances, especially when they know that it's ending. And most of these people who were a part of the program had less than $200 in savings when it ended. Just a lot of competing priorities. And like we said at the top, with existing holes in the safety net, you need more money to make meaningful change.
Yeah, we actually saw something similar here in Birmingham where the financial benefits during the pilot quickly disappeared after the pilot ended. And actually, some of the moms said that they had less hope for the future after the pilot than compared to the control group that didn't receive any cash.
Yeah, that was definitely the most alarming finding.
Yeah, and there has been some pushback against focusing on that side of the report because the saying is that, guaranteed income, it's not meant to end, so don't emphasize the ending side of it.
Right. And Michael Tubbs, the head of the group I was talking about, Mayors for a Guaranteed Income, says a real guaranteed income policy, it wouldn't end. It would be more like Social Security and Medicaid, where people aren't booted off just because they've been using it for a while.
I feel very confident in this idea that it can't be a temporary thing because poverty is an ongoing pandemic. It still is economic insecurity.
But, there's still a lot of opposition to guaranteed income, especially with the idea of making the payments ongoing. The criticism is that would just make people dependent on the cash, which, is similar to criticism we often hear about just about any welfare program. Now, I spoke with a councilwoman in Shreveport, Louisiana, Tabitha Taylor, and even though she actually supports a guaranteed income in her city, she does not like the idea of there being no restrictions of how long people can be on it. She does want it paired with things like workforce development training and to slowly cut back on the payment so you don't have that sudden financial shock when they end.
You kind of have that build up, this is going to be the last check that you're going to get at this point. Maybe we'll do just like a build down in a sense of we're just going to slowly decrease this.
To be clear, there are no current plans for a guaranteed income in Shreveport. So, Aubri, what is actually next for the guaranteed income movement?
Yeah, while we don't have more pilots planned kind of in our area, there are a bunch of pilots still happening in other parts of the country. The goal for Mayors for Guaranteed Income is, to build up research and a case that they say will support a federal policy. And obviously, a federal policy depends on who ends up in the White House. So advocates are waiting to see who's elected and go from there.
All right, Aubri, always good to talk guaranteed income with you.
Yeah, you too.
And now it's time for Gulf States Gems, a series that shines a light on some of the treasures of the region. Here's our criminal justice reporter, Kat Stromquist, with this week's gem from Ridgeland, Mississippi.
My Gulf States gem is Red Samurai. It's my favorite sushi restaurant that's also in a gas station parking lot. It's in Ridgeland, Mississippi, outside of Jackson, and I often stop there to refuel when I'm on reporting trips in the area. I like Red Samurai because it has a futuristic ordering kiosk, cheap rolls, and, my favorite, a brigade of kawaii neon claw machines. It's a really relaxed and low-stakes atmosphere, and has a friendly staff. They also seem to do a lot of takeout.
You could see pictures of this and other Gulf States gems on our Instagram. And we want to hear about a place you consider a gem. Could be a restaurant, a park, a beautiful sunset spot. Send us your suggestions. Email connect@gulfstatesnewsroom.org. This week's Gulf States Gumbo was produced by me, Stephen Basaha. Our head chef is Priska Neely. Our theme music is by DJ Supreme. Special thanks to our partner stations, WBHM, Mississippi Public Broadcasting, WWNO, and WRKF. You can find us in your podcast feeds every Friday. Look us up and be sure to subscribe. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to stir your roux.